pochodzi z kraju, w którym, jak wskazują wszelkie statystyki umieszczone w raportach OECD, relacja lekarz-pacjent jest na najwyższym poziomie. Pacjent ma możliwość współdecydowania o wszelkich kolejnych krokach terapeutycznych i ta współpraca przynosi obopólne korzyści. Zobaczymy, co ma nam do powiedzenia Joan Andresen. Serdecznie zapraszam na scenę. Joan, the floor is yours.
So, can everyone hear me? Good. Okay. Good morning. My name is Joan Andresen. Thank you very much for having me here today. I am honoured to be invited to this third International Patient Empowerment Congress and very excited to tell you about the Patients Association Denmark and the work we do in Denmark to promote a better and more patient-centred healthcare system. I hope you'll enjoy my talk, and please feel free to ask me any questions you may have after the talk. And I look forward to partaking in the Congress today and tomorrow. The time of this Congress couldn't have been more apt. Right now in Denmark, there's a massive debate between patient groups, politicians and medical professionals. Patients are demanding to be heard and politicians are listening. And doctors are accusing patients of being spoilt, conspiratory and ignorant. And politicians are accused of interfering where they have no business interfering. The battlefronts are drawn, and I'll get back to this later. Let's see if this works. There we go. Let me begin by laying out the principles behind the organisation I represent, the work we do and the results we have achieved, and looking ahead, the lessons we've learned and how they will impact our work. Patient rights are a subset of the rights given to all human beings in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This means the rights of a patient are protected by law before, during and after any treatment. It ensures the autonomy of the patient, his or her right to accept or decline treatment, right to information, right to test results, tissue, and his or her body before, during and after treatment. Navigating these rights within a political, economic, religious and ethical frameworks, in addition to the dogmatic traditions of medicine, is complex. This is where the Patients Association Denmark comes in. Originally born out of the bone lock scandal back in the 90s, the Patients Association Denmark has been advocating on behalf of patients for more than 20 years. We are an independent organisation run entirely by volunteers. We represent all patient groups and have been involved in many and very diverse issues on behalf of various patient groups, from LGBT to Borrelia, from bone lock to thyroid, from chronic pain to war veterans, from vaccine injury to cannabis-based medicine. We are there advocating on behalf of the patient. Among our current and very exciting projects is the so-called body therapeutic treatment of war veterans with PTSD project. We were invited to take part as an impartial patient organisation in this multidisciplinary research project, looking at different therapies for war veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. The project is a collaboration between 6 different groups, all with very different focus, but all with the same goal, namely improving treatment for war veterans. 40 veterans are expected to take part, and the initial results will be published next year. In Denmark, access to healthcare, excluding dentistry, is tax-funded and thus free of charge for the individual patient. In addition, we all have access to our medical journals through a web-based system, which means we can check blood tests, referrals, prescriptions, medical notes, and yes, we can even see who has looked into our journals and when they have been looking. In this sense, we're very progressive, as we don't even have to ask our doctor to get our records. Our records belong to us, and the information contained within are 100% open to us. We cannot add or make correction, but it is an important tool in patient empowerment, and it is part of our work to inform patients of the many helpful possibilities available within this information platform. This is a screenshot from the platform. However, these highly digitalized and centralized databases containing personal information about ordained are also a contentious issue. The last couple of years, the Patients Association Denmark has fought hard against the uncensored collection of DNA from ordained into a newly established National Genome Centre. A genome centre is undoubtedly an invaluable tool and a dream come true for researchers within every field of study, with a huge benefit for all. However, a database with no clear boundaries and no informed consent on the individual level from the patient concerns us deeply. Our genome becoming a commodity to be bought and sold by everyone, from medicinal companies to insurance companies, is not only a theoretical possibility, but an inevitable outcome when the National Genome Centre becomes a reality. Not to mention the basic but really important concerns pertaining to data safety issues. We hope the concerns we and others have raised will result in heightened focus on data safety, better defined boundaries for data use, and a requirement for informed consent from all patients whose DNA is collected and stored indefinitely within this database. Ensuring that patients have access to information regarding their rights and options in the complaints procedure is vital for patient empowerment. Therefore, this is at the forefront of our work. In recognition of the cumbersome and complicated nature of navigating the healthcare system, ordained have free access to an impartial and confidential patient advisor. This patient advisor can guide patients, including guiding them through the complaints procedure. When a complaint is filed, the first step is always a dialogue meeting between the parties involved. Often, this is enough to solve a complaint, but by the very nature of the situation, the patient is a vulnerable and often disadvantaged state when he or she has undergone medical treatment. The Patients Association Denmark is part of the impartial and highly influential consumer advocacy organisation called TINK. The organisation has access to seats on the National Disciplinary Board, which deals with complaints and compensation at the highest level. We're privileged to be represented on the board by our chairman, Annette Ulstrup, who is a trained nurse. We believe this and the entire complaints platform is extremely important not only for patients, but for the medical professionals as well. Patient feedback is vital for bettering medical procedures, and the goal must be to ensure failures lead to better outcomes for future patients. Patient outcomes are the measure of success for patients as well as for medical professionals. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that the treatments offered are indeed based on unbiased and independent research. The inherent weakness of much medical science is obvious. The parties who have monetary interests in developing new pharmaceuticals are also the ones lifting the burden of proof when it comes to efficacy. We know this affects and indeed skews research and published results. The Patients Association Denmark is extremely concerned about how often treatments offered are not based on solid, unbiased and independent research. As an example, shocking example, recent figures published in Denmark suggest that only 8% of treatments for cardiovascular disease are based on solid, evidence-based clinical research. At universities, professors are likewise warning us that the dependence on private funding from invested businesses skew the areas and possibly the results of research. In addition to this, most doctors readily admit that they generally cannot keep up with the new research and thus tend to stick with what they learned or didn't learn at medical school 10, 20, 30 years ago. Adding to this quagmire, we also know that the average time for new knowledge to make its way into clinical practice is up to 17 years. Knowledge is good when it's based on a solid foundation. When the foundation is not solid, the detrimental effects are manifold. The obvious consequence is inadequate or detrimental patient outcomes, which on the individual level is bad enough. But more worryingly, we are currently seeing a significant pushback from patients against mainstream medicine in favour of a plethora of more or less obscure and oftentimes dangerous alternatives. The reaction from medical authorities has largely been one of incomprehension. It appears they are unable or unwilling to see the connection between the highly publicised medical scandals and direct samples of research fraud and the growing scepticism among patients. On the contrary, as demands for transparency and dialogue grows, the tone from the various medical societies engaged in the public debate becomes increasingly hostile towards the patients and the politicians supporting our causes. We as patients are accused of being conspiratory and ignorant, and politicians are accused of interfering where they have no business interfering. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is what is happening right now in Denmark. The debate has been gathering pace over the last year or so. Two main cases appear to have brought the debate to the level it's at now. The case regarding the use of medicinal cannabis and the medicinal options for patients suffering from thyroid disease. Both cases were pushed hard by patient advocacy groups, including the Patients Association of Denmark. And both ended up as high-profile cases which were taken up by the media and politicians. We had several meetings with the Danish Parliament's Board of Health and the Minister for Health. The results were positive for both patient groups. In collaboration with other patient groups, we were able to gather support for a new law enabling doctors to prescribe medicinal cannabis to certain patient groups. Unfortunately, many doctors still refuse, citing lack of proper research. The irony of this is glaring, considering how much of their day-to-day work involves treatments with similar unsupported pharmaceuticals. Nevertheless, the fact that more patients will be able to get their prescriptions from their own doctors rather than having to travel abroad is positive and will also, in time, widen the empirically based evidence for and against medicinal cannabis. The work with regards to ensuring more and better treatment options for thyroid patients is still ongoing. Until 2009, there was only one brand of one medicine available to treat thyroid hormone deficiency. After an international scandal involving the unannounced changing of the formulation in this brand, which affected hundreds of thousands of patients worldwide, many adversely, one other brand of thyroid medicine became available to patients in Denmark. However, there are actually many more brands and options for the treatment of thyroid hormone deficiency, And during the last 6 years, the focus on this area has exploded in Denmark. The Patients Association Denmark has supported thyroid patient advocacy. It has been an uphill struggle with sadly viable examples of arrogance and hostility from within the medical community. However, there has also been progress, as increased awareness amongst patients has led to increased awareness among doctors. And overall, more patients are realizing how they themselves can be active in ensuring better treatment outcomes within the limits of current pharmaceutical options. Obviously, our work doesn't just leave the responsibility with the patient. We have met with various politicians and the Board of Health and the Minister of Health. There have been hearings where we and other patient advocacy groups have been invited to speak. There is still work to be done, but there have been a few positive outcomes. Endocrinologists have been ordered to accept patients that have hitherto been refused on the grounds that their patient has gone abroad or sought private help in order to get medicines not widely used in Denmark. Likewise, certain blood tests that have been refused patients have been re-established, and finally, a committee which includes patient representatives has been set up to make new and better guidelines with more emphasis on the patient in the treatment of thyroid disorders. In addition, more medicinal options have become more easily available, although, as is the case with the medicinal cannabis, getting doctors to prescribe the medicine is not easy. But as awareness increases and more doctors gain experience, no doubt they will also become more confident using the options available. The most important lesson we have drawn from especially the last couple of years of patient advocacy is the need for more dialogue. We need to openly acknowledge the concerns of both parties, as was mentioned before, and find ways to minimise the distrust that permeates the current discourse on both sides. Distrust towards the conventional authorities leaves patients open to potentially dangerous and damaging quackery. Therefore, it is of vital importance for the medical community to acknowledge that the distrust was not born out of nothing. There have been far too many examples of dishonesty and lack of disclosure, which has undeniably damaged the general reputation of the science behind the treatments offered. Likewise, too many skilled medical doctors are lacking in the interhuman skills that are a necessary part of medical care. Dismissing these incidences and ignoring patient experience undermines our common goal of optimal patient outcome. Looking to the future, we pose these points to consider. How do we get patients and doctors to accept that treatments may be suboptimal, but still trust that they are the best we have, based on unbiased and up-to-date research? How do we get doctors to accept that the best way to truly gauge the efficacy of a treatment is by including the subjective experience of the patient? How do we include patient wishes without doctors feeling undermined, and vice versa? Definitely, we are not all trained doctors, but thanks to the internet, every patient now has access to a wealth of information. Obviously, it takes a certain level of ability and critical thinking to discern the masses of information one can find. But certainly, many patients, particularly those affected by chronic illness, are willing to and capable of doing diligent research. And in addition to the information which can be found by researching, the patient holds the most important piece of the puzzle, namely his or her own actual experience living in the body undergoing treatment. Dismissing patient knowledge and experience is simply not an option for a serious medical practitioner. Sorry, I'm one behind. Okay. Thank you for listening, and thank you to the organisers of the 3rd International Patient Empowerment Congress. Good luck with your project. Thank you for having me. Thank you.